الآن في ووكينج مسجد ووكينج ماسك، وهذا أول مسجد بني هنا في بريطانيا، وسنتكلم مع المسؤول هناك ويشرح لنا التاريخ. وعندنا كذلك ريفرند ريتشارد كوك، وهو من جيران المسجد، لهم كنيسة بجنب المسجد، فإن شاء الله يشاركنا في الحوار. وعندنا كذلك مرة أخرى الدكتور عبد الحكيم مراد من جامعة كامبريدج، فإن شاء الله سيكون حوار حديث ثري إن شاء الله بإذن الله. وسنمشي ونزور المسجد، ندخل المسجد إن شاء الله.
There are Christian churches all over the place. There's one just across the road there, and many Christians are fearful of how to understand Muslims, and so we've worked hard to try to get Christians and Muslims to meet each other almost on any pretext. So a meal, a meeting, a discussion, visits to the mosque. Because it's the first purpose-built mosque in Britain, many Christian people want to come and see here, and we've had sometimes 100, 200 people come to see the mosque and have Islam explained by some of the brothers or sisters here.
Great.
And
so, what year was it built?
It was built in 1889, and it was
first all the way until 1889.
Yeah, first purpose-built mosque in this country. And there were one or two mosques in seaports, but they were mostly house mosques in Liverpool or Cardiff, apparently.
Was that a result of the Tolerance Acts that you were telling us about last night?
Well, before the early Victorian period, it would have been impossible to build a mosque in England.
Right.
Even the non-conformists often experienced severe difficulties, and
Yes.
the Catholics
Couldn't open churches in some places until about the 1830s.
So the Act of Toleration made it theoretically possible to have a place of Muslim worship, and before then Muslims were persecuted here. In the 17th century there are 3 cases of Muslims being put to death in Britain for not converting to Christianity.
So,
two in Wales and 1 in England.
Queen Elizabeth I had a treaty with the Turkish Sultan, because so it was the Protestants and the Muslims against Catholic Europe.
right.
So it was very interesting, the relationship between this country and the Muslim heartlands.
And the Moroccans actually, in Mansour al-Dhahabi was the Moroccan Sultan, had also a treaty with Queen Elizabeth, and he in 1602 he actually sent an emissary and wanted to make an alliance. He sent an emissary and wanted to make an alliance with Queen Elizabeth to actually take over America from the Spanish, so that the Muslims and the English could rule together. And he died in 1603, so nothing came of it. Right.
What is the relationship right now between Muslims and Christians here?
Well, I mean, we have lots of churches, none of them as, in a sense, as large a community as the community here, and we've tried to get Christians and Muslims to be friends, to understand each other. So from our side as a Christian community, we try to run courses that explain Islam and why the community is like it is, so that the fear and the ignorance, which then leads to intolerance and aggression, can be overcome. But I mean, we've only started, but it's a beginning.
Can we take a look at the mosque?
Well, sure, yeah. Good friends here at the mosque and the leadership.
What's always extraordinary to me is that because I left Christianity and became a Muslim, like Dr. Abdul Hakim, I never felt that I was abandoning Jesus.
No, sure.
You know, I really didn't. I did not feel I was giving up what was essential to me about the Christian faith. I felt, in a sense, I was enhancing really my Christianity by accepting another dispensation. I mean, I really saw it, and in a sense, I've really looked at myself, and in terms of my family, because I was raised in an Orthodox tradition. I've looked at myself as really not abandoning anything that my parents, for instance, taught me of those essential truths.
Yeah.
But I, in a sense, adopted a Unitarian branch of Christianity, which Islam is simply an extension of that, because I think the Muslims have always seen Jesus.
We love him. We all love him.
Yeah, that's the tragedy of the myth of the clash of civilizations, that the two stories can't overlap. But the reality is that the great stories of the Bible are also there in the Quran.
Yes.
The God of Moses is
The
the
God
God
of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob,
of the Quran. There are no two religions that are more closely interlocking. It was wonderful opportunities for building understanding, but the mutual misunderstanding and ignorance, it seems, has never been greater.
I mean, that's how I feel. I really feel that we in the West, we have just an immense amount to learn from the Islamic tradition, because it succeeded in doing certain things very early on that Christianity literally took almost 2,000 years to get to. I mean, the fact that this mosque was built in 1889 and that there were Muslims in the 17th century being killed for their faith and Catholics persecuted in the 19th century for their faith, and yet in the Muslim world we have Christians visiting the mosque in the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ, when the Christians came and actually came into the mosque, and in one narration he allowed them to pray in the mosque. And then we know also that Umar ibn al-Khattab, when he went to the church in Jerusalem and refused to pray in it. The Christians actually offered, because he conquered the city, they offered him to pray in the mosque, and he said, I don't want to pray. And they asked him, why wasn't it permitted? And he said, no. But if I pray, I would fear that Muslims later would say, Omar prayed here, let's make it a mosque. And they would break the trust of protecting the church. And stories like this, which traditionally Muslims were they were nurtured on these stories.